Thanks for joining, everybody. My name's Evan White. These are some of my friends and influencers here in the space. This will be about a 45-minute conversation or so thanks for attending. Brief introductions first. Joel Cheeseman here on the left, your guys' right. He's one of two Chad and Cheese. Matt Alder, recruitment future. And Jennie Neuharth, JCK. She also has a brand new podcast she's running. I'm going to do a bit of a round robin, couple light questions for everybody. Start with Joel. Joel, tell us about your first job.
Well, first of all, I was told this was the bone zone, so the fact that it's the innovation zone and not that is disappointing. Sorry, too early for jokes. All right, my first job or HR job?
Your first job in HR.
First real job would be McDonald's. For those of you who are old enough to remember the McDLT, we keep the hot side hot and the cold side cold. I was the McDLT guy, so I was flipping those. It sucks, and I have great respect for people who work in fast food, as does everyone else. They should anyway. First HR tech job, 97. I was hired at a job board called eSpan, which probably no one knows or remembers. They eventually became Job Options. We're sister companies with NAS, a agency that's still around, was acquired by Spherion, and I was a .com casualty short thereafter. So that was my first job in HR tech.
Same question?
Same two questions. First job in HR.
Okay, my first job was washing up in a hotel that had gone bankrupt. So it was kind of a 4-star hotel. They were trying to sell it on, and they couldn't afford any staff. So the hotel was entirely staffed by students and people on catering college placements who were supposed to be learning from the professionals who were there. There were no professionals there. We ran that show. And one day I'll write a book about it because it was extraordinary. My background in HR tech is recruitment marketing. So my first job in recruitment marketing, I worked for the Guardian newspaper in the UK, selling classified recruitment job advertising space in the newspaper and their very early internet site. Then I went and worked for various recruitment marketing agencies, including TMP owned Monster at the time. And that was me away in the industry.
Awesome. Thank you. Jennie?
So I happen to have a pretty significant head injury, and I don't remember anything from before 2020. And I don't actually know what my first job was. So I can't necessarily answer that question.
Okay.
But for my first job in HR, based on conversations with people, I know that I was hired as a project manager to work with Panera Bread. I was a project manager by trade. And they were having an issue and needed to figure out what they were doing wrong with talent acquisition. This was like back in 2015, I believe. So I've been told. So I started and asked the right sharp questions to understand what the problem was, and then ended up reverse engineering what I know now is employer branding, because I noticed that we were losing all of our talent to Taco Bell, which was surprising because Panera was generally known to be a much stronger brand than Taco Bell. Don't tell Cheeseman this, but they were doing it right? Like they when you walked into a Taco Bell, there was all this stuff about hiring. When you walked into a Panera Bread, there was nothing. And so when I asked them for their talent acquisition, content or copy, they gave me stuff, and it was like the wrong font. The pictures were completely out of date. It was ridiculous. And I was like, this is bad. And so I went and actually built a new brand activation on Canva at the time. And it ended up getting rolled out across the company. So that was fun.
Thank you. So now kind of a question for the room, something to think about. If you have ideas, you want to share them, we'd love to hear them. When you hear the term influencer, what comes to mind?
Douchebag,
usually. I think what many people think.
Younger, tech savvy, douchey, yeah. If that's your question, I guess douchebag would be what comes to mind.
Does that resonate with the audience?
Yeah, a few.
They have a powerful platform no matter how they use it, whether it's for good or for bad.
Yeah, powerful platform.
This is good. Audience engagement. Okay. Anybody else?
Everybody.
Annoying, driven. He's got something. It's just a job.
I think look at it as a job. Like Jake from State Farm is looking
it's a very broad definition, right? Like we're all influences on this. Yeah, I mean, I wish I had Mr. Beast's bank account, but yeah, it's a wide variety of people. Let me pass the mic.
Yeah, what do you think? What comes to mind for that?
Yeah, I mean, similar. You know, when I think of influencers, it's I like that question and I like that answer about having a platform. And I think it's a word that's taken on lots of meaning. And yeah, I think that it's actually about the questions you ask, because I think the influencer is a label, and my question is always, who do you influence and how? And I think that's kind of a more important aspect to it than just the label. I think it's an easy label to throw around, but I think actually understanding the platform someone has and how they can actually, you know, change things is a more important part of it.
It's fascinating to me the number of young people who aspire to be thought leaders or that. Very few of them will actually be that, of course, but the fact that so many young people want to do this for a living is fascinating to me.
And to influence all different types of things, from gamers, like I had a conversation at dinner last night, people are like so many gamer influencers, and they just get paid to stream whatever video game they're playing, and people, for whatever reason, send them things and pay them to do it. Mm-hmm. Jennie, specifically, so on the idea of influencers, why are influencers important to building brands? How do they help?
So I'm going to answer this specific to the HR space, HR tech space. In the HR tech space, the buyer's journey is incredibly complex. It is not like any other industry that's out there. And buyers typically, in my personal experience, have looked to the people who are getting it right, or to those names where they can trust. And so if I have a question, I'm going to that person everybody knows, that who do you know piece. And it's helping me make music through noise. So it's almost like, because of the complexity that exists in this space, it required this analyst influence layer to help help guide or navigate, or help the buyer to navigate kind of how the world worked. And so as it relates for companies that are out there, I think one of the most important pieces is trust is transitive, right? So if you've got somebody who has a strong following, people look to them to learn, or for whatever it is, or to laugh, or to find new, like whatever it is, right? I trust that person. They also have, like, I've joked with Joel and Matt, like when I hear their voices, because I listen to their podcasts regularly, when I hear their voices, it activates my growth mindset. And so like I'm in a situation where I could, like, I want to learn, and I'm one of the people who I was the practitioner. I still am in a lot of ways a practitioner, and then I'm also on the other side too. And if you leverage those narratives, those stories, again, their trust, they're lending their brand to you in order to endorse or say, like, this works, this doesn't, this is what we can change. And it's bringing, net new eyes and trust into the buyer equation, which is an important thing.
Easy. So I love that, and she's been saying that for a long time, that trust is transitive. I think that's real. And specifically for this room and this conversation, let's talk about how influencers. Oh, please.
Best answer I give of the day. So we all, certainly Matt and I, monetize our content, and when we have an initial conversation with a brand, inevitably the marketing folks get in there and start talking about ROI and start talking about like how many listeners and how many this and that. And right off the bat, we say, we're having the wrong conversation. If you want traffic, go to Facebook, go to Google. Like, if it's a traffic game, like we're not your medium, right? We're trust. So when you look at it as a brand, what are the two things that are important? It's like eyeballs and trust. Anyone can buy eyeballs. I can buy Facebook ads all day, every day on Sunday, right? But how do I buy trust in ads? You just can't do it. Just because your brand is on Facebook doesn't mean anybody trusts you to do the job that you say you're going to do. So I think that what the value we bring is 25 years plus each experience in the industry. We don't partner up with fly-by-night, companies. We don't associate with scam artists. Everyone that we do business with on a sponsorship level, we usually know them. We've known them for years. We've seen the product. We approve of it. So I think people that listen to us have a certain level of trust that if we're going to have a brand associated with us, that it's someone they can at least trust to have a conversation with and start the journey of buying that product. So echo your sentiments. If you come in talking about traffic to a thought leader, like, you're having the wrong conversation. It's like, what kind of trust does this person or does this content creator have with the people that I want to buy my product? That's what's important.
I really don't, but there is one piece there that I'm just going to have the last word on this piece. But Matt and I were recording some content earlier today, and we were talking about like the importance of podcasting and like how that relates to the buyer's journey. And there are a lot of things that are out there specifically in our world, like of talent acquisition and HR tech, that are net new concepts for people to have to understand, right? When I can take the exception in terms of a leader and help to highlight their story so that other people can understand it, that's how the exception becomes the rule. And so the same thing when you have somebody like a Joel or like a Matt or myself who's up there like lending our brand, like the trust piece, but then we're pulling in people who might be getting it right. Like it helps give, there's like the mirror bias, right? Like, so I trust people who are like me. If I've got a practitioner who's like, oh, this is a cool thing that I've done outside the box that's helping me to get work right or whatever, all of a sudden now I might not have known that was something that I could do. And it's helping me to be able to cross the chasm in terms of user adoption, which should be, if you're selling technology or services, that should be your all-time goal, right? Like to get the change part.
I can't be left out. I need to say something. I think that trust thing is really, really important because this is a really complicated space. If you're a buyer, you come to a conference like this and you just kind of walk around the expo and it's just overwhelming. And I think that certainly the mission with my podcast is to help people navigate that space. And, my approach to it is I'm an interview-based podcast. I'm a practitioner-led podcast. So it's about interviewing people and the challenges they have and how they're solving those challenges. So people can kind of learn from them or just get comfort that they're not the only people with those kind of challenges. And I think that that's just incredibly important because it's such a complex world and a complex space that we're working in. So the important thing to me is to be that trusted curator of stories and content because I think it's just incredibly important.
Yeah, I think so. What you're talking about is like the ecosystem, and there's so many people. Thousands of people are coming in to Transform this week. They'll all be here. The practitioners are going to be pitched to and sold to by numbers of people. How do influencers help brands develop and grow into this ecosystem?
First off, if the influencer does not know your product, what you do, how you solve, like they're not going to be able to connect the dots to those people that matter for you. And so it's important to first be like sharing what it is that you do. Obviously, give a damn too is a nice piece as well. But because I know, and I'm a little different because I don't remember how things were done before 2020. But when I'm talking with somebody, I'm just curious of like, what's the problem that's keeping you up at night and how can I, ideally like asking them for, consent first of like, hey, are you looking for any recommendations in terms of solutions or whatever it is? I'd love to go introduce you to Fountain. I'd love to go introduce you to HR Geckos. I'd love to so that I'm hand holding that person over there. So I can't connect the dots if I haven't collected the dots, right? So it's really important to make sure that the people who are identified as influencers understand who are you, what do you do, what problems do you solve, and how can you help? Because otherwise they're not going to be able to be, the broker in terms of those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add here, gentlemen? That's a question. How influencers can help brands adapt into the growing and large ecosystem?
Yeah, I think one of the things, age is its own benefit, especially when you've been in the industry. And we get a lot of companies. I was talking about our show Firing Squad earlier, where it's kind of a Shark Tank for startups. And so many times we've been there and done that, and a company led by a 27-year-old has no idea, who Jobster was back in the mid-2000s. So I think from a historic perspective, we had that benefit to companies. And also I think just from, you'll appreciate this from a PR perspective, how do we cut through the clutter? Like, you have a company that I approve of and we like, what can we do to help you get through there? So, in a month or so, we're going to jump off the stratosphere with a company. Like, that's an extreme example, but in terms of cutting through the clutter, I think Chad and I have done a pretty good job of putting ourselves out there to help companies get noticed.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's finding the stories that actually resonate with the people who come to these conferences, because I run my podcast has 2 episodes a week. I have a lot of guests. I get a lot of pitches. I don't know how many you get, but I get at least 20 pitches a week from vendors wanting to be on the podcast or whatever. And most of the time, yeah, and most of the time,
More or less than 20.
no, I don't know, whatever. But most of the time, they're not the kind of stories that I think people will want to listen to. And I think it's kind of having a story that resonates with the challenges that the target audience has, and that's always the most important thing for me when I'm looking for content. And the amount of pitches I'll get where it's like, so and so is going to come and tell you how AI is going to change the world of recruiting, and it's like, well, how are they going to do that? Why are they going to do that? So I think it's just helping people match their stories to the target audience in a way that the target audience will actually listen and take action, because I think there's so much noise out there. It's kind of just really easy to get lost in all of that.
And we as content creators have to know what our listeners want. So we better be sure that whoever we pick to be on the show, like, we're passionate about, and we have some approval of who they are. Like, there's some really not bad, but companies that just have no connection to us at all. And why they would even pitch us is sort of bizarre. So know who you're pitching the companies out there before you look stupid in front. There's a lot of templated, hi, I'm Josie representing so-and-so company, our exciting CEO. And so, customize your messages. There's some really bad PR people out there. Evan is not one of them, fortunately. But yeah, there are some bad ones out there.
Just to sort of pick up on that, I think the audience thing is really interesting, because I think if you ask us what's the most important thing to us, it's serving the needs of the audience, basically. And to do that, you do a lot of work to understand what the audience likes and what the audience listens to. And the great thing about something like a podcast is you have the data. I know what people like to listen to, what people don't like to listen to, how long people listen to certain interviews, what headlines work, all those kind of things. So we're constantly putting content out to that audience. And the only way that our podcasts grow and are successful is if they resonate, because podcasting is a very crowded space. Lots of people try it, lots of people try and do it. And to grow, you have to have that connection with the audience and really understand what they want and how they think.
Yeah, thank you. So building on that, examples of successful influencer collaborations. The 4 of us, we've worked on a few together. 2 I want to talk about, the HackerPop and your fantasy football. Who wants to kick off? HackerPop or fantasy football?
So in regards to just the story of how we did it? Yes. Okay, so this will go back to sort of doing things that connect with the brand and the listeners. Chad and I are meat-headed sports guys. We love football and fantasy football. So we came up with the idea, why don't we do fantasy football with Chad and Cheese? It's on brand. We know a lot of our listeners are similar to us. So who would we partner with to do something like this? So we knew the guys at Factory Fix. If you don't know Factory Fix, it's sort of in the name, but they help talent find jobs at sort of, the warehouse, the factories, sort of, these are blue collar folks. So you're talking football, fantasy, it totally makes sense from a brand scenario. We put it out to our audience, who wants to play fantasy football with Chad and Cheese? People submit, hey, I want to play. We get in and have a diverse audience. We try to be, equal female, male, diverse audience. And then we play, if you're not familiar with fantasy, there's a board and who's up in points. So every week on the show, we say, here's our leaderboard. I throw in nicknames for everybody. It's kind of funny. And then at the end, The winner, we have have you seen these like championship chains, like sort of the college football teams? It's like a chain about this thick. There's a big medallion. So the winner of fantasy football gets this huge chain. It's great for social media. The chain is branded with Factory Fix on it. Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's not a clock, but yes, you get the idea. We've done like championship belts before, like the wrestling belts. We've done that. So a lot of it's stuff. If you know Chad and I listen to the show, it makes total sense that we would have something like that. It wouldn't make sense to like have wine tasting with our show. So we try to keep on brand for that, and that was one with fantasy football that we've done 4 years now, and Factory Fix is kind of a established brand now. They enjoy doing it, and it's been good for them and good for us.
That's good. I'll talk about that HackerPod thing. Conversely, having wine tasting and my podcast connected are probably quite more like whiskey tasting. So HackerPop was something we did with HackerJob, which is a technology-focused sort of job board type recruitment solution. They're based in the UK, but they have a growing presence in the US. They've got a New York office. And they wanted to do something around, it was HR Tech actually, in October. They weren't exhibiting in HR Tech, and it was just like, what could they do? What could we do to create some content, get some people in a room? And it was interesting. So what we did is we hired out a section of the Brewdog pub, which is up the strip. It's a Scottish brand, and it's got an amazing roof terrace. So it's a very cool venue. And then we kind of had sort of 50, 100 people come along who were kind of handpicked from the conference, and then me and Jennie kind of went around the room with mics, just asking people questions and sort of getting content together. So there were lots of things going on there. There was the opportunity for HackerJob to get their name in front of the people at the conference. There was the opportunity for them to talk to the people in the room, which they did. But there was also the opportunity to create some great content. So, leading up to that, we were advertising it, we were talking about it, their brand was everywhere. Then we recorded the content. And then obviously I think it was actually that week, I edited it late at night in my hotel room in the middle of HR Tech. We then put the content out, and then that's a podcast in its own right. So you get that kind of triple whammy, all the promotion before the actual event itself, and then the content afterwards. So it was the first time I'd done anything like that, and it worked really well. HackerJob were really pleased with it. Evan did a great job at pulling it all together. It was good. And I think it's interesting the type of things you can do with things like podcasts if you kind of really think a bit creatively about it.
So real quick, I don't know if you did this at the HackerPod, but if you have customers or prospects that you can't get on the phone for a demo, they will get on the mic to do a podcast. So one of the things that we do, so with HackerJob, we've done recording from the booth, and one of the questions we will say is, okay, who should we get on the mic? That question partly is, well, who's a customer that you want to keep as a customer, or who's a prospect that you'd like to be a customer? Because people are more likely to say, oh, yeah, when they hear, oh, Chad and Cheese are going to be in our booth, they're doing interviews with TA leaders, can we get you to sit down for 15, 20 minutes? Sure. And invariably, those people become better prospects for being clients. So that's kind of how you can roll in a good event, but then also keep the bottom line in mind of who can I turn into from a prospect to a customer by using these podcasters or whoever.
Okay, cool. So it wasn't mentioned, but I just want to make sure it was okay to say that, so I didn't say it. But Evan is really good at thinking outside the box to what's our goal, what are we trying to do, and how can we do it amidst a sea of sameness, right? And so one of the events that we did it was Nashville, right? Mm-hmm. It was in Nashville for Breakfast, was there was a cruise, a boat cruise. And we had, how many people were on that? 50. We had 50 people on this boat cruise. It was how long? 2 hours. It was 2 hours. So you get 50 people who are hand-selected for a reason on a boat they can't get off for 2 hours. Live music, great food, good conversation, alcohol. But it was intentionally designed for that, right? It wasn't just a happy hour. You've done what's the big, see, I don't know any of the words of these things, but the Ferris wheel, the giant Ferris wheel, where like you're on it for 45 minutes, an hour. Yeah. And, but it's like figuring out what is a goal you're trying to solve. And then how can I reverse engineer some sort of event or experience, leveraging influencers that are going to help bring those key ICP, whatever it is that you're working with, the key people that you're looking for from a buyer standpoint, but then intentionally designing the experience so that it is memorable. But B, like, you don't want someone to just show up and leave, right? Like if you're spending this much money on an event, you want them to be there. You want to have a conversation with them. Like, and the content that came from that boat cruise or from the Qualify did an event at the zoo in San Diego a couple months ago. They're an HR tech company that their mascot is a koala. And so there was an event that Evan did at the San Diego Zoo where all these leaders we were all there. And so it was like connected to the brand in some way. So the dots were connected, which made sense, but it was fun, but it was outside the box and intentional and memorable.
To me, all of these things are all about, it's community building. And you want to buy from someone who you trust, who you like, you get along with. You don't want to work with people that are over pitching you. That's what the trade show floor is for. Or not. But you want to build the relationships.
Well, and also listen. Like,
Yes.
Those are your opportunities to listen at scale. So do I have my right go-to-market? I can pressure test or test some of those things on people who are more educated buyers too, and be like, hey, does this work? No, it doesn't. If you sent me that email, I would be completely turned off, right? But that's also not the opportunity to do that from a work standpoint. You want to build the trust first before you make the ask or ask for something from that person. And so once you have that trust, then it's really easy to call Matt up and be like, hey, Matt, I've got, this thing, or hey, Joel, like I wanted to run this thing by you, right? Because we have that established trust. But if I don't have it, yeah, we have to talk with before you talk at.
Yep. So now, next, we're going to kind of change topic here a little bit. Talk to the people in the room. These are the vendors. How should they be thinking about identifying influencers for their own brand? Are there criteria that they should be thinking about? How to help them align with the influencers?
I think it's simple. It's like who do your clients and prospects trust? I would do it in one sentence. That's
good. Who has a connection with the show energy? I don't think it's on purpose, but we tend to attract companies that we're sort of like-minded. We're similar to them. Their marketing mindset is a little bit dangerous, a little bit outside the box. They're sort of game to work with us to how do we cut through the clutter. We're not for everybody. I mean, and that's okay. We're totally fine with that. If you're everything to everybody, you're nothing to no one, right? So I think it's important. And this goes to podcast success, but if you're someone you're not, it's going to come through. And Chad and I think do a good job. Fortunately, we're very similar, but our show is us, and we're going to attract companies that appeals to, and the companies that hate us will never work with us ever, and that's okay. We're not for everybody. So I think it's important to be genuine in who you are, because that will attract the people that feel the same way. As REM, a band probably a lot of you know, Michael Stipe, lead singer, he had an interview when I was in college that really resonated with me. I want to share it with you now. They said, how do you make music to the audience? And he said, I don't make music for the audience. I make music that I like and that I want to do. And inevitably, people who appeal to that will come to me and the band and the music. It's the same with podcasting. Be yourself, and the people that relate to that will come to you. Don't try to fake it, because you'll fail.
Anything? Mm-hmm.
The question was, how do you select the right influencer?
Yeah.
No, you're fine. I just was clarifying and reframing, like making sure I've got it right. So I'm more of a scientist than I am like the artistic part. And so if I'm looking to choose an influencer, I would scientifically go about it, where it's like, here are the different influencers in there. And now I'm going to take that to a cross section of my users, not just the people who just like me, but a cross section of net new, medium, like more experienced users, and ask them which of these resonate, right? Because I don't want to pick somebody who's just like, I'm in a vacuum and somebody told me that this is the right person to go. Like, take a data-driven approach to it. And so, because you might be incredibly surprised that the person who resonates the most with your ICP is not the person who's the most confident in the room, right? Or the one that everybody knows. And the goal is not to get the most flashy person, no offense, but like the goal is not to get the person everybody knows. The goal is ultimately to build trust and to be able to get conversions into whatever it is that you're trying to do, whether it's sales or partnerships or what have you, right? So checking your own design bias for like who should be there and making sure that you're taking a data-driven approach, having your beta group of people to test it against. But again, it's not the people who are on your team that are doing this. It should be a cross-section of your users from different stages of your buyer's journey. And if your goal is to get net new eyes on your brand, right? You should also be asking people who know nothing about you that are in the space of like, who would you resonate with? And one of the best ways, I was talking to Des earlier, and he works with one of the HR tech companies, but this is his first event that he's here as is it okay to share this? Okay. First, I'm just making sure I have consent too. That's important too. But like, it's one of his first events where he's here and he's not like on the vendor floor. And it was like the most important way, like to be able to leverage these events is to go and sit alongside of the buyers and listen to what questions are they asking? What's the language that they're using to talk about these things? What's important to them? Who are they gravitating towards, right? Use this as user experience research and watch. And then take this event, take a couple other events, and then be able to, again, sorry. I'm a nerd.
Not,
Help me, because one of your answers was really big on trust, and which tends to be very subjective. And then you went into like analytics and data. So help me connect the dots with your statement about trust, but then like sharpen the pencils and get the data together. Are they connected somehow? And I'll admit that I'm not as smart as you are. So just help me, because I may not be alone. How do you combine the trust, very subjective, and the data, very objective, to create a solid marketing relationship, care relationship?
Yeah, user experience research. So asking the right sharp questions, like checking against your hypothesis, right? Because trust is transitive and like building trust is really important. But then also making sure that you fully understand what your buyers are looking for and what trust is for them, right? Who are they trusting? What do they trust? And then watching. Like, this is not something that you talk at. This is something where you're watching who are the people that like are gravitating towards other people. Do you see that person hugging everybody, right? Like, are they connected to everybody? Does everybody know them? You watch like Matt or Joel walk down a hall and people are going to flock to them, right? Like, those are elements, those are signals from a data standpoint that trust is there. That doesn't mean that that's the right person to trust, right? But it's a signal that means I want to learn more, just like with any sort of data experience. Does that make sense?
Okay, we're thinking about sponsoring Matt Alder's podcast. Let's ask 100 of our customers if they listen, and then based on the answers, we will decide to work with them or not. Is that what you're saying?
So if you're thinking about doing Matt Alder's podcast, you would do something that was more like bite size, and then actually asking, like, checking the data to see, did that resonate with your customers, right? That's a little different than like, who are you going to identify as your net new influencer, right? Does that make sense?
When you say a sample size, what does that mean? Like, we're going to do a couple shows and see what happens?
Something that's more bite size that you can get actionable data from. And then being able, like, working with somebody like an Evan, like, he's going to give you, like, here's something where we can test a proof of concept, right? So the proof of concept is partnering with this. Do we have engagement? Do we have, and then having, again, that cross section of your ICP, and then asking them. You could just do it from a listening session with people, more like small group versus like large scale.
I mean, that's not really how we approach the process. Like, we have people who come to us and say, hey, can we do a couple shows, see what happens? Like, we won't even talk to them. Like, to us, branding is a marathon. It's not like, hey, let's do some Facebook ads and see if we get some clicks. Like, we want to have a long-term relationship with them. And again, it's not how many sales, how many eyeballs, what's our ROI? It's like, did we build a brand? Did we build trust and connection to what you guys do? So I think I would come on the other side of that, of like, you need to go into it thinking, this is a relationship, this is a long-term thing, this isn't like throw $100 at it and see what happens. I think that's the wrong way to go about it, just from our perspective and how we pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose to build a bridge between both of these.
Build a bridge for the flock of people.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't wait to. But to kind of build a bridge between all this, I think the thing is it's about asking the right questions, because I think that there can be. This almost obsession with numbers. It's like, how many people did we reach? How many people listened to this? How many people? And that's not the question. It's like, which people and what did they do? And I think that's the thing. So it's, you can quantify that, but I think people tend to quantify the wrong things, and they look at overall numbers, which are meaningless, particularly when this is enterprise sales and it's like one person who can, make the difference for a massive, a kind of a massive project or a massive sale. It's like, we're not selling pillows or, widgets or stuff like that.
People have been conditioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
To ask about ROI, and we're not Joe Rogan, right? We're not selling Casper mattresses.
Yeah.
And invariably, the audience that we both attract, if you just get one sale,
absolutely,
that's going to pay. For a big spend.
So, effective collaborations, they're kind of built on that authentic relationship. You guys talk about being hugged by dozens of people in the hallways, emails, 20s a week, right? For the people in the room and the vendors, how should they break through some of that noise to work with you? What does the negotiation side on your side look like when a brand wants to work with you? Is there a vetting process on your side? How should people in the room approach you at conferences or digitally?
You can send me an email or come and talk to me in a corridor. I think it's an interesting question. It kind of goes back to what Joel said about authenticity and what I said about understanding your audience, because there have been a number of potential sponsorships that I've just turned down because they didn't feel right for the audience. And in particular, there was one organization who will remain nameless, who I was really happy to work. No, I was really happy to work with. But their big organization, their advertising agency had crafted the sponsorship message for the podcast, and it was just way off what my audience wanted. They were offering, a free trial, save £100 by having a free trial of something. It was basically the podcast messaging that they were using on like mass market podcasts. And I was like, I've got an enterprise audience who want to know how you're going to help solve their problems. I cannot put that advert out, because what that says to my audience is that I don't understand them, that I think that they're going to resonate with this kind of thing. So I just didn't run it. And they wouldn't change the advert because their approval processes and their advertising agency and all that kind of stuff. So that was the end of it. So, to me, it just has to, it just has to kind of resonate properly with the audience, because the audience is everything. Without an audience, I don't have a podcast. So that's the thing.
I think that whether it's on purpose or not, scarcity is an incredibly powerful tool on our side of the table in terms of who we work with, controlling the narrative and the relationship. Early on, we didn't plan on monetizing. I mean, we thought we'd have a few sponsors. So we went to the people that we knew. So we had a relationship, they became sponsors, and we made a deal with them when we said, as long as you're a customer, as long as you're a sponsor, this price will never go anywhere. So there was this sense of loyalty, like, okay, we're on this journey together. They're not going to raise price. And we have customers from 5 years ago. We haven't raised prices on them. And there's also a good chance that they won't leave, because they know if they do, they go back to the end of the line.
Both sides are loyal.
There's a relationship. Yeah. People look at this as way transactional than it should be. It should be a relationship more than it is. So people come to us and say, hey, we want to do an ad, or we want to do something with you guys. And more times than not, we say, sorry, there's a waiting list, and we're happy to put you at the end of it. And if somebody cancels or goes by the wayside, we'll give you a call. If that works, we say, hey, well, if you're in the waiting, we're at this conference. Talk to Evan. We'll jump off the stratosphere. We'll be on the booze cruise with you. So there are ways around that. But saying no, putting the velvet rope, saying, hey, you just got to wait your turn, really is impactful for us. You can't just come to Chad and Cheese and say, I want to do an ad, and you're on. It's much more complicated and time-consuming than that. Unless you're doing In-N-Out burgers, then maybe we'll put you to the front of the line. But yeah, Scarcity is hugely impactful for what we do.
Last few minutes. Are there questions from the audience? You have literally two of the most important HR podcasters here in the room. What would you ask them if there's anything before we kind of close up today?
Is Jennie not answering questions? No, nothing before 2020.
A lot of different equity here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The question was advice to someone trying to start their own podcast.
I know you're chomping at the bit. So what do you want out of it? That is the question. What is our mission? Too many people start a podcast because, I can buy a mic for $100 and I can put it on wherever, and then I got a podcast. But always start with the end in mind. What is our mission here? Is it we want sales? We want just to get our brand out there? Are we making money or not? You got to start with the mission. Once you have the mission, then you can sort of create how do we get to that end game. Way too many people start with just let's just put up a podcast. It's kind of like blogging back in the day. Everybody has 5 or 7 blog posts in them. But once they get to 3 to 5 podcasts, it's what the hell do we talk about now? So think about all of that and going into it. Most companies, it becomes a content game, right? We're a vendor, we need to put content out, we need to talk to our customers. That's fine. The other thing I would say is commit to it. Don't do a few shows and done, right? Because then if you go to your website, about us, whatever, we have a podcast. The last time they put a podcast out was in 2022. This company's a bunch of losers. I'm not going to use them. So have all that stuff in mind, but you got to start with what's our mission and then formulate around that and then keep consistent and play the long game with podcasting.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo all of that. And I'd also add to it, what is it that's going to be different about our podcast? Because what you have to remember with podcasting is most people who are regular podcast listeners will only listen to 1, 2, or 3 different podcasts a week. So it's not that you're competing with other podcasts, you're competing for the space you're competing for someone's time to pay attention to your podcast or be loyal to your podcast. So it's kind of what is it that makes you different? Because, the amount of podcasts that come out, and I'm always really supportive of any new podcast because I think the more the more successful podcasts there are, then that's better for the industry. But they're all the same. They're just, it's kind of what makes it different. What's going to make someone want to listen to this? I always listen to Joel's podcast when I'm walking my dog. It's now part of my routine, basically. It's kind of I need to know whose birthday it is when I'm wandering around. No. So it's, and it just fits into my week like that. If I don't walk my dog, I don't listen to it. So it's kind of what is it that you do that's different that makes you stand out? Because building a podcast audience, even if you've got a really big email database or all that kind of stuff, is really hard.
And ask yourself, if no one listened to my show, would I still do it a year from now? Because if the answer is no, then don't do a podcast. Because then it's just a numbers game, and you're in it for the wrong reasons.
And also be careful, because today launching a podcast is very different than I imagine launching a podcast more than 4 years ago. In what I mean by that is generative AI is going to be able to pull transcripts and be able to also tell stories about what it is that your company does. And so you're training models of the second I post anything, it's out there in the ecosystem. I want to make sure I'm intentionally crafting a brand experience for my product. And that's going to look different than it would have, again, prior to Gen AI being a thing. And so just be very intentional about it. Is this something that you know, is it evergreen? Does it make sense? Am I just, it's be intentional is the short version.
How many blogs have you read and said, oh, they just put this up for SEO? Too many. It's the same with podcasting. And you see so many corporate podcasts, like they're just doing this to hopefully get some listeners and some content. That's the wrong way to think about it.
I think, you know, I would say that if you're launching a corporate podcast, it's like you can look at it from a how can I repurpose all of this content perspective, I think, potentially. Yeah. So it's kind of like I've done 5 interviews with my customers. Actually, I've got no intention of building a long-term podcast that gathers audience, but what I've got 3 or 4 hours of great content that I can then repurpose into sort of different ways and means of doing it. So again,
if your mindset is repurposed content, then you're okay. Like you're
that's what I mean. It's kind of like how
you put it on shorts on your Instagram page, but so few companies are there.
But again, it's kind of like why are you doing it?
Yeah, and just I wanted to add one more thing to that is because I'm the talent acquisition leader and employer branding side. Hey, Jess, Jess just was there too. But your podcast, depending on where you are in terms of the scale of your organization, can also be used for lead gen of candidates. To like, who are you? What do you do? What problems do you solve? What is the culture like in your organization? So it might not necessarily move the needle in terms of customer acquisition, but if it does from a candidate acquisition standpoint, and it's able to, like, you're able to highlight your people, right? Like that's something that's helping people understand, is this somebody who I want to go, you know, to work for? And it's so funny because when we're talking about all of this of like, who's the right influencer? Who's the wrong influencer? Is this transactional? Is this relational? That's what the buyers are trying to assess with talent acquisition, right? We're trying to go away from transactional talent acquisition, checking boxes. We're trying to understand, how do we ask the right questions to assess quality of hire, right? It's the same thing from a different lens. And so and you know how hard it is, right? You're feeling how hard it is from a customer acquisition standpoint. It's also an opportunity to put your shoes in the feet in the shoes, however the saying goes, empathy of your buyers, because for a talent acquisition world, they're not understanding how to navigate this process too, and it's difficult for them as well.
Closing thoughts before we hand this back over to MPH. Any other questions?
Yeah.
I have a question about successful partnerships with organizations that you've done, as far as how they thought of before the content and after the content, as far as how they continue to cycle or continue to use that material. When have you seen that be successful for corporate partners that you work with? And to see what does that look like?
Successful use of content.
Yeah. So when we if we generally do like an event or we'll do a long form interview, usually videos in there, we will give the raw data or content to the vendor so they can chop up shorts. Shorts are incredibly popular. People love the minute or less snippets of a commentary or whatever. So take that and create snippets, and then of course you got TikTok, Instagram, and Reels, and like that can go in multiple places. One of the great things about podcasting, particularly when you do video, is you can reformat it to anything. You've probably seen little snippets of sound bites where the voice, whatever goes, and you're listening, and then the transcription on the bottom. So you can just be on LinkedIn like, oh, what's this guy say about this? You can highlight your CEO and have snippets from that. You can also extend it. It's like this one topic we talked about. Let's add something that came to mind after we recorded it. You can add an addendum to it, right? So like, I answered this question, I forgot to add this, want to just throw that in there, and that's an easy way to do that. But yeah, it's a very sound strategy to take an hour of show and turn that into tens of pieces of content that you can get a lot of leverage out of.
Yeah, 100%. All of that. I think the only thing I'd add is, I have one of my sponsors who's maybe slightly more traditional in their content approach, and I've kind of worked with them for about 3 years now. And over that 3 years, I've interviewed like lots of their clients and also quite a few of their thought leaders. And again, once you've got that interview, they've got the transcript of that interview. So they've turned that into blog posts. They've turned some of them into almost like mini white papers, because I've done all the hard work for them. I've done the interview and got them that, and then the same with the audio. So I think I'm really disappointed when people miss that opportunity, because I'll always always happy to provide the audio, the transcript, the whatever, and not enough people take that opportunity, because it's great content, particularly if I'm interviewing one of their clients, because it's an independent person talking to their client. It's not a sales pitch for their company, but the company gets mentioned in it. That's great content, and I think you can do a lot of things with it.
I'll add, on the event activation side, if you're going to spend the money to have $5,000 or $10,000 bar tab and spend money to have the influencers there and promoting, not everybody's going to get a chance to come to that event. So maybe you have 50 people on the boat, but there are 50,000 people that might see this content in advance. So the events that I try to put on are like FOMO-inducing events. You make sure that all of the cool people that are coming to the party are sharing that they'll be there, so then their friends that are stuck back home wish they were. They're still engaging with that, even if they don't make it to the party. Closing thoughts, Jenny?
I desperately have to go to the bathroom, but I'm totally honest. The biggest thing with all of this, you're never going to get the perfect blueprint. You got to choose to begin, right? So choose to begin, test out if it's working, drift and shift your strategy based on what's working or what's not. But the most important step is to take that first one, right? And the only way that you're going to know if it's the right thing to do is to fail, right? It's like through the failures that you glean the blueprint to get it right. So that would be my very short thing before I go to the...
Thank you. Thank you, Transform, Jenny, Matt, Joel, for attending. Thanks for everybody being here.